So it's been 2 weeks since the launch of the new iPhone 16e, and I've had my fair share of time with it to play around, to test it out, and I wanted to share my final thoughts on it. Now, my first initial impressions was that this thing was not very spectacular. I was saying things how it was lacking a lot of features, the price doesn't make sense, and how people shouldn't buy one. But after playing around with it for some time, I'm starting to change my mind about it, and I think it's really not that bad. But before we continue with this video, make sure to drop a like and a comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, as well as turning on the post notifications to see when I upload. So first, I want to talk about the overall build quality and form factor. So in Apple fashion, all of their iPhones are just built incredibly well. It feels very premium in the hand. Now it only comes in one size, but this smaller form factor does feel really nice in the hands. I'm used to using a Pro Max sized phone, so coming down to a smaller size is definitely a bit of an adjustment, but it does fit into my hands a lot better. It's much slimmer, it's much lighter, and just easier to grab on the go. I also do appreciate how the back camera bump is a lot more streamlined. It doesn't really stick out like a sore thumb. So I want to talk a little bit about the display. So it still has the older style display from the iPhone 14 with the notch on top. The display is quite sharp with a lot of detail. It's pretty much the same OLED panel that they've been using for many years. But even with the lower refresh rate of just 60 Hz, it feels pretty buttery smooth. Just navigating around the phone, web browsing, even gaming, I don't really notice the lower refresh rate being an issue. The fact that there is such a huge thick border, it kind of makes the screen feel a lot smaller than it actually is. But if you are upgrading from an older generation phone, especially a prior SE, this is a welcome refresh. If you are coming from a newer generation, like a 15 or something, going to this one, it does feel a little bit like a downgrade. When it comes to the performance, I gotta say that I'm blown away. It's super fast and very snappy. You can pretty much do any task that you can think of on this phone without an issue. It still uses the same exact chip that is on the rest of the iPhone 16 lineup, minus 1 GPU core. But even when it comes to heavy graphic tasks like gaming, photo editing or video editing, there's really not a difference that you can feel. It still does extremely well in games. On top of that, Apple still retained the 8 GB of RAM on this phone, allowing for Apple Intelligence compatibility. And that is the biggest selling point of the iPhone 16e, is the support for Apple Intelligence. I've been using Apple Intelligence in my day-to-day workflow, and I gotta say, it is a game changer. One of my most favorite features is how they're able to summarize your notifications or emails. It just makes life a lot more convenient, a lot easier. Apple Intelligence does work on this phone very, very well. The next thing I want to talk about is the camera performance. So we are rocking a 48 megapixel single fusion camera. So because you only have one camera, you don't have a telephoto lens, you don't have an ultra wide lens. I don't think the absence of the telephoto lens is that big of a deal because you can still zoom in and it's just kind of cropping the image. But the camera on here has a decent amount of detail where you're not losing that much quality if you zoom in. The main thing is the lack of the ultra wide. I think the ultra wide camera is very useful, especially if you're going to be doing group photos. You don't have to back up so much just to fit everyone in the frame. So if that is something that is a deal breaker to you, unfortunately, we only do have one camera on this thing. Now the camera itself is not the same as the rest of the iPhone lineup. Yes, it is a 48 megapixel camera, but the sensor size has been decreased. During the daytime, or if you're in a well-lit area, it doesn't really matter because there's a lot of light coming in, there's a lot of detail to be captured. But when you are in a dark environment, you are gonna start to notice some noise and some grain. And to expand on the whole camera topic, we are missing the camera control button on the side, which to be honest, doesn't really bother me. I think we can all agree that the new camera button was not really all that good. It was kind of a nuisance than it was helpful. I personally don't ever use the action button on my 16 Pro Max, and if anything, I mistakenly would touch it sometimes. So it is nice that they got rid of it because it's a lot more streamlined on the side. Case manufacturers don't have to stress out about it. But what I do like is how they still kept the action button on the side from the iPhone 15. You can pretty much program it to anything that you want. You could program it to, a camera if you want to have quick access to that as well. And what's great is that a lot of third-party apps are actually starting to support the action button. So that gives you a lot of versatility with the action button, which I think is a major plus that this phone still has it. When it comes to the battery life, I gotta say I'm really impressed because this is a smaller size phone. And it has the battery performance of something like a Pro model. Usually these smaller size phones have a smaller battery, therefore having less battery life, and it's pretty self-explanatory. But Apple has remanufactured this phone's casing on the inside, allowing it to fit a bigger battery. On top of that, with the software optimizations, like a lower GPU core, just being more efficient overall with the new chip, Apple has really made the battery life improvements significant. When I use this during my day-to-day, comparing it to something like a Pro Max, I can get about the same amount of battery with it. I only have to charge it one time a day or one time every 2 days depending on my usage. Now when it comes to charging this phone, it does support standard, USB-C charging and fast charging, but it does not support MagSafe. That may be a deal breaker for some, especially if you are someone that uses MagSafe accessories. Personally, I do use a MagSafe charger primarily for all of my devices, so by not having that was kind of a deal breaker for me. But you gotta understand, for the price range, you can't get everything. It still supports wireless charging using the standard Qi charger, but it's gonna be much slower. Overall, I gotta say the iPhone 16e is really not that bad. I just think it's unfair to compare it to the rest of the iPhone 16 lineup because at the end of the day, it's not actually an iPhone 16. So the only fair comparison is the other SE models. And if you're gonna compare this to the previous SE models, it is a major improvement. Now, sure, there are other alternatives for the $600 price point. You can get yourself a pre-owned or refurbished iPhone 15 Pro, which is gonna have a lot more features, a lot more performance and whatnot. But at the end of the day, that's a used phone, right? Like, do you really want to get something used? Are you okay with that? So in the brand new market, this is pretty much the best value that you can get. You get everything that you would want out of an iPhone, minus some of the features that, to be honest, are kind of mediocre and not that important. I think this is a great starter phone for someone who is new to the iOS world. Maybe you're switching over from Android and you want something basic that's, easy to use. And I think a $600 entry point is not that bad for what it is. You are getting iPhone 16 level performance with the same chip, the speed and all of these software capabilities like the Apple Intelligence. Maybe you're getting something for an elder, right? Someone who doesn't need all the complicated features that's gonna make the phone, difficult to learn. Or maybe you're getting something for a gift, right? Maybe for maybe a kid, maybe a teenager who doesn't need all that extra stuff. Getting them a brand new $600 phone is better than getting a used phone of an older generation. You want it to be new, nicely packaged in the box rather than getting a pre-owned phone. So overall, I gotta say the iPhone 16e is not that bad. It just depends on who you are and what you're looking for. If you're typically a pro user and you like the extra features, the ProMotion display, then this is definitely not something that's in your range. But for someone who's looking to get just the basic necessities out of their phone, maybe they're not a very heavy user, they just want something that works, I would say this is definitely an option. So that is my final thoughts on the iPhone 16e, that after using it for some time, I'm starting to understand that there is a very specific customer base for something like this. If you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like and a comment below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.